Let's begin our news bulletin in the U.S., where the number of deaths from COVID-19 has surpassed 106,000 with over 1.8 million infections. Brazil has reported a record 1,262 deaths from the virus in the last 24 hours, bringing the toll to over 30,000. The global death toll has crossed 380,000 with over 6.3 million infections. More on that now in this report.
Coronavirus infection cases continue to rise in Latin America. The World Health Organization has declared the region as a red zone for the virus, as 4 out of 10 countries with the highest number of cases are in Latin America. But as the virus continues to hit people across the spectrum, the UK says people from Black and Asian backgrounds are at a greater risk of dying from the virus.
And we know that our great cities have been hardest hit by this virus. And this work underlines that being black or from a minority ethnic background is a major risk factor. This racial disparity holds even after accounting for the effect of age, deprivation, region, and sex.
While many global economies are easing lockdown restrictions, there have been rising calls for rapid and mass development of a vaccine. As Turkey and Russia have agreed to cooperate to develop a drug and conduct clinical trials, the UK and China have also decided to collaborate for quick results.
We knew about COVID's implications very, very early on, in the timescale. So when it was first coming to prominence in the UK, there was a sort of general disbelief of, what is this? Because we had links in China, we could see that what was happening on the ground. We were able to make a decision very early on.
Scientists in the UK are running a trial to see if ibuprofen can help patients sick with the virus.
Here in Pakistan, the number of COVID-19 cases has surpassed 80,000, with over 4,000 infections reported in the past day. The health ministry said 67 people died overnight, increasing the death toll to nearly 1,700. The ministry said that more than 17,000 tests were conducted across the country in the last 24 hours. It said so far, nearly 29,000 people have recovered, while 837 patients remain critical. The ministry said the province of Sindh leads in the number of infections with more than 31,000 cases. Indian forces have martyred another 3 youth in Pulwama district of occupied Kashmir. Police killed the Kashmiris during a cordon and search operation in Kangan area. The troops, after sealing all the entry and exit points of the area, are conducting door-to-door searches. Yesterday, Indian forces martyred 2 youth in Pulwama district, while on Monday they killed 13 civilians in Poonch and Rajouri districts. Indian atrocities in the occupied valley have increased despite the COVID-19 pandemic. The occupied valley has been reeling under an Indian-imposed curfew and communications blackout since August 5, 2019. Members of the EU Parliament have asked the President of the European Commission to take notice of the human rights violations in occupied Kashmir. In a letter to Ursula von der Leyen, 15 parliamentarians said for the past 7 decades, India has been continuing its intolerable suppression in the valley. Members called upon the EU Commission to express their concern with the Indian government on these issues. They said the Indian government deployed thousands of troops to the disputed region and has detained several political leaders. They said the Indian government has threatened the negotiation process by imposing a 9-month-long military lockdown of the valley. China says the UK has no jurisdiction or supervision over Hong Kong. This comes after British Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab said China is destroying the jewel of Hong Kong with its crackdown. China's Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Lijian said foreign forces threaten the city's stability and prosperity. Earlier, Prime Minister Boris Johnson said Britain would change its immigration rules for people in Hong Kong if China imposes new security laws. He said immigration changes will amount to one of the biggest changes in the UK's visa system. He said if China proceeds, it will be in direct conflict with its obligations under the joint declaration with the UN. In France, thousands of people have defied a police ban and COVID-19 restrictions to join protests over the custodial death of a black man in 2016. Campaigners defied authorities after police denied their request for permission to protest. Violent clashes broke out as police used tear gas on crowds while protesters hurled stones at officers. Demonstrations were also held in other cities, including Marseille, Lyon, and Lille. Some of the protesters carried Black Lives Matter placards, the movement that began in the U.S. In the U.S., the Pentagon has moved 1,600 soldiers on heightened alert status into Washington, D.C. region after 8 consecutive nights of anti-racism protests. Pentagon spokesperson Jonathan Rath-Hoffman said the troops are not involved in defense support to civil authority operations. This comes after President Donald Trump had taunted state governors for not accepting his proposal to deploy the military to quell the unrest. Protesters clashed with police across the country to demand justice for African-American George Floyd, who was killed in police custody. Washington's Mayor Muriel Bowser said she does not want armed National Guard or military on the streets.
First of all, I heard what you all heard about the president saying that he wanted all manner of civilian and military might deployed across the country in the district. So we all heard that ominous warning. We don't want the armed National Guard, armed military, and we don't want any of those things on DC streets.
Well, elsewhere, the state of Minnesota has filed a civil rights charge against its own police department to investigate systemic discriminatory practices. Staying in the U.S., 8 states and the District of Columbia have held primary elections despite the COVID-19 pandemic. The states of Pennsylvania, Indiana, Maryland, and Rhode Island delayed their nominating contests earlier in the year to avoid the worst of the outbreak. All states have encouraged mail-in balloting as a safe alternative. The primaries come amid a partisan brawl over voting by mail. While Democrats support it, Republican President Donald Trump condemns mail-in balloting as ripe for fraud. Well, the U.S. has agreed to South Korea's proposal to fund the labor costs for all Koreans working for American forces. In a statement, the Pentagon said Seoul will pay over $200 million to fund 4,000 Korean workers through the end of 2020. The Pentagon said both countries are yet to resolve the broader cost-sharing issue that led to the workers being put on unpaid leave earlier this year. U.S. FK officials said all furloughed workers will return to work from June 15th. Both countries are embroiled in a disagreement over how much each should pay to support the roughly 28,500 U.S. troops stationed in South Korea. Talks over a new treaty have been stalled after Seoul rejected President Donald Trump's proposed amount of $1.3 billion per year. Jordan has warned Israel against the annexation of the West Bank and Jordan Valley. In a statement, the Foreign Ministry said preventing Tel Aviv's plan will protect the peace. It says Israel's annexation decision will not be unanswered. The ministry said if Tel Aviv goes ahead, violent conflict will start, and the option of a two-state solution will not be possible. Israel is expected to carry out the annexation on the 1st of July, as agreed upon between Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Benny Gantz. Israeli forces have detained 20 Palestinians from various parts of the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem. The Palestine Prisoner Society said students were among those detained. The raid triggered violent confrontations between Israeli troops and local youth after forces opened fire on them. Elsewhere in the northern West Bank, Israeli soldiers rounded up 5 others during multiple raids in Nablus district. Security forces also raided several houses and apprehended 3 Palestinians from Ramallah and Al-Bire district. Conflicts between Israeli forces and Palestinians are on the rise after Tel Aviv announced plans to annex the West Bank and Jordan Valley. Turkey says Khalifa Haftar's forces cannot win the ongoing conflict in Libya. In an interview, Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu said the Libyan National Army is not interested in finding a political solution to the conflict. Çavuşoğlu also accused the United Arab Emirates and Egypt of prolonging the war. Libya's UN-recognized government of national accord has been under attack by Haftar forces since April 2019. Over 1,000 people have been killed in the ongoing conflict in the North African country. Two firefighters have been killed in two explosions at a perfume shop in Argentina's capital, Buenos Aires. Emergency services said 15 other rescue workers were wounded while trying to extinguish the blaze. Officials said both firefighters were killed by the second explosion as they were picking up their fallen colleagues. 6 of the wounded workers were airlifted to hospitals, while others were in stable condition. Authorities are investigating the cause behind the blast that rocked the middle-class neighborhood of Villa Crespo. In a rare move, Venezuela's government and opposition have agreed to collaborate in order to combat the COVID-19 pandemic. Information Minister Jorge Rodriguez said the government will work the opposition-led National Assembly to seek funds from the World Health Organization. Rodriguez said Health Minister Carlos Alvarado, National Assembly's Julio Castro, and the Pan-American Health Organization signed the June 1st agreement. He said under that agreement, stakeholders will seek funds to improve testing, acquire personal protective equipment, among other initiatives. Earlier, the opposition leader, Juan Guaido, said the opposition had launched several projects in collaboration with the regional arm of the WHO. Venezuela has so far reported over 1,800 coronavirus cases and 18 deaths. At least 127 journalists in 31 countries have died due to novel coronavirus over the past 3 months. The Geneva-based Press Emblem campaign says media workers play an important role in the fight against the pandemic. PEC Secretary General Blaise Lempin said a number of them died due to lack of adequate protective measures while doing their jobs. The NGO said in March about 2/3 of the journalists who died were on duty. It said in May alone, 72 journalists fell victim to the virus. It said Latin America was the most affected region, followed by Europe, Asia, North America, and Africa. I'll be back after this break with business news. Stay tuned for that. European stock markets are gaining momentum on hopes of a revival of economic activity as authorities lift lockdown restrictions. Frankfurt's DAX has gained nearly 2% after the German airline Lufthansa stocks jumped over 4%. The CAC 40 in Paris is trading over 1.5% higher as automaker Renault gained nearly 8%. London's FTSE 100 has gained over 1%. In Asia, Seoul's Kospi led the gains, closing nearly 2% higher after shares of Samsung Electronics skyrocketed around 6%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index gained nearly 1.5% as shares of Alibaba soared nearly 4.5%. The Nikkei 225 closed over 1% higher, while the Shanghai Composite remained flat. Time to find out what the weather is like around the world. Well, for the latest updates on these and other stories, you can always follow us on our social media at Indus.News. Thanks very much for watching.